Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. This is episode 398. Today is Wednesday, 8 a.m. IST, and we have a lot of important information coming your way. First off, the markets. Is there a recession or not? Because the markets fall one day, come back up the next day. So there's a seesaw movement that we are seeing. So let's first welcome our co-host Sridhar Chityalaji and ask him his opinion on where he sees the markets headed. Is there some positive offshoots already, green shoots already coming, or what? Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskar, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. It's late good evening in New York and probably good morning in India, and then probably afternoon in other parts of the world, or early morning in the other parts of the world. Markets are responding, Sriji, to very positive earnings from the FedEx as well as from Nike. They've been looking for the bulls have been looking for some ray of hope, some green shoots to see, to move up the trend, to buck the trend of the 5 days of the markets, the depressive situation of the markets going down. So what you're witnessing is, I would say, response to the data that they have seen in the market with the hope that more positive news will come out. That's one. The second is there is, whether it is Nike or FedEx, it is about consumer confidence. There is also the hope that there is positive sentiments in the consumer side of the business. Whether it is a Christmas Santa Claus rally remains to be seen. But the general trend in the market is, or the general observations in the market is, that we do see recession in 2023.
Thank you very much, sir. And now let's take a look at what is happening in the southern border of United States. Now, Title 42 was put in place by Trump, and this kind of stopped, to a large extent, the inflow of illegal immigrants from the south of the United States. And then it was about to be lifted on Wednesday. And something happened at that point of time. Sridharji, kind of walk us through what is going on. Is this going to be going away anytime soon, or it's going to be in place forever?
I won't say that it's going to be in place forever. Once the Republicans take charge, we'll get to know what exactly is the border policy how the border policy situation is going to change and take shape. This is they taking charge on January 3rd. Title 42 was put in place during Trump time as a result of the COVID. It effectively means those people who are perceived to have had COVID or who are a threat, they were all asked to go back to Mexico and said, stay in Mexico till you kind of get better, and then we will assess the situation. This is the illegals trying to swarm across through the El Paso or the southern side of the border. And the Biden administration had anticipated, and with hope, they were saying that the surge would happen and the buildup was going on. But a case was filed by 19 states. Remember, we covered this in DGI, led by Texas,
Yes,
Ken Paxton, an attorney general, saying this whole thing is a problem. These people are being put into the societies, and it's a social issue and it's a law and order issue. Plus, it is an economic issue. Justice Roberts said, no way, this is going to expire on Wednesday, and we are going to keep it until such time Biden administration files a response, and let's see what happens. The no date has been set, so for the time being, at least we have temporarily stalled the surge. The surge averages between 4,500 to 7,000 people every day trying to cross the border, and they're just. We will be covering this as a separate topic in this new budget bill, and you will be amazed to see what some of the provisions in that bill are to allow all these illegals to come across the border. This is the Biden's policy.
Can they sneak it in before the next House sits, sir? Convenes?
No, Title 42 is in place, but
not Title 42. I'm talking about the $1 trillion package, sir.
$1 trillion package is approved.
Oh God.
Yeah, we'll cover the details. It is approved.
Yeah.
$1.7 trillion has been approved. That includes the defense. But last year was 1.5. We did an extensive story on what the 2022 budget was and what the 2021 budget was, how we raked up trillions using the 2020 COVID as a pretext to get various Biden's programs, the social programs in, and to sink US economy further. We have gone past, we're just over $32 trillion, just close to $32 trillion. And from $27 trillion, we lifted the debt limit to $31.7 trillion. We have breached that number. And this budget was needed to fund, but also to give a temporary reprieve and further lift the budget limit, Sriji.
Thank you, sir. And next, we're going to take a look at what is happening in the Russia-Ukraine war. Well, Zelensky was there in the United States. He addressed the House and I believe the Senate, and he made a pitch for more aid. And while this is going on one side, he also talked with Biden on how to bring a peaceful end to this war. At the same time, Russia is stepping up its attacks by sending more drones, and the US is trying to counter that by Patriot missiles. Sitaji, all this smorgasbord that's going on right now, do you see us ceasefire anytime soon, sir?
I think that in your great summarization and context, one important piece of information is missing. Where is EU absent? Where is EU? This is not a Russia-United States war, which is being fought on the Ukraine border. But this is very much a EU issue. And surprise, that EU, is more focused around how it meets its energy requirements while continuing to feed Mr. Zelensky his war aspirations. So I think we have asked this question. Putin is not willing to surrender, and actually Putin is not willing to kind of concede. I won't use the word surrender. Putin is not willing to deaccelerate his agenda in terms of the drone strikes. Now, most of the strikes are drone-based strikes, which is now he himself has acknowledged that. So this war goes on, and the Patriot missile, the Patriot system, which is all the missiles that are launched, including drones, it helps Ukraine to thwart and prevent this landing in their what is there. I mean, most of the infrastructure is destroyed, but this probably acts as a deterrence for future strikes or repel future strikes, not as a deterrence. So both nations have hunkered in for war. Unless there is some breakthrough, we don't see this. This thing continues, sinking further the world into a much worse place than where we are already. Another $1 billion is going to be sent along with all these toys to Mr. Zelensky. And obviously, Mr. Zelensky is saying, I'm a bravo, and nobody expected me to survive, and I've survived. So you keep on giving me more money. I'm more hungry, and I'll go on fighting.
Well, this is a sort of mess that US tries to get itself into just about every time. And, no matter what, like him or hate him, Trump kept US out of any new wars in the 4 years that he was in place. And there was relatively peace and tranquility. He even took some bold decisions, such as to move the US consulate to Jerusalem and also have Saudi Arabia and UAE come closer to Israel in reality, to understand the reality of the situation and so on and so forth. So a lot of good things that have been done have been completely swept under the carpet by this new trying to make something or anything stick on the January 6th commission. Sridharji, a quick word on that and also on his taxes. They are now saying that he paid low taxes. So he had clever chartered accountants. I mean, what can I say, sir?
Well, the January 6th committee was a grandiose mission, which was just as the 2016, this Russian collusion with Trump and Russian election interference, which we know was a hoax through various Twitter file releases plus other data that we have seen. this January 6th went on for 2 years. They don't have any what you call prosecutable proof except to throw more allegations and more data. So this is a good way for all these bandwidths, who are bandits who are, pro-Trump or anti-Trump. And similarly, they will say there's these Republicans who are, pro or anti-democratic bandits. So the story is this went on. There's nothing there. And there's been nothing there. There was definitely a major confrontation, major issues, and we will never get to know what the root cause is and how this got triggered. So that's January 6th. What about except they said Trump needs to be prosecuted and investigated by more investigation by Department of Justice, and criminal case should be filed against him. So this is what the January 6th. You remember our Adam Schiff made the comment that all the evidence will be redacted or evidence will be, taken away because it may expose these perceived witnesses who came forward. So that's the outcome of January 6th. Tax, well, what's the next one that we can go on Trump is the tax, okay? And so they said, okay, fine, release the tax files. So they released the tax files. They said, oh, you didn't, now they're saying, IRS, they're going after IRS to say that they were not keeping a close eye and watching him, Sriji. So therefore, that's it. So nobody wants to talk about Hunter Biden and what he has done because he belongs to being in their tent. But they want to talk about President Trump.
And viewers, I was going to do a separate monologue on Twitter file 7, but I thought it would be better served if I have Sridharji also weigh in, because he was close to what was happening in the on the other side, meaning on the East Coast, while these election things were playing out. Now, I just want to quickly summarize what Twitter file 7 talks about. It talks about FBI, DNI, Department of Homeland Security, all of them trying to weigh in one way or the other. Now, they also say that FBI said before the revelations on Hunter Biden happened that there is going to be something on Hunter Biden and that Twitter should not allow that, and it should be deterring anybody from publishing the story. So one could immediately say, aha, FBI has become democratic. They somehow wanted to see the back of Trump, and therefore they may have also chosen their partisan bias over their professional obligations. I mean, I'm just saying someone could jump to that conclusion. However, let's take a quick look back at the Trump presidency. 2016, he gets sworn in, and then the then director, Comey, gets fired within a few months. And if you have to listen to Steve Bannon's channel videos on why Steve Bannon recommended that Comey be fired. I mean, there's also a Netflix, I think, program, either Netflix or Amazon Prime. There is a long story about what happened on Michael Comey, and that is carefully done as if he has done everything right. Anyway, I'm not going to say anything about whether he did right or wrong. So after that, one more FBI director got fired, isn't it, Sridharji?
Yes, I think, you have had a series of FBI directors during that particular period come in, not following the due protocols, if we have to say, raking up, making it more political rather than conducting the FBI operations in tune with the government, or in a just manner. So what's the just manner? You won't be raking up issues, you won't be taking up things, you won't be directing the media to behave in a specific manner. You won't be stirring up items which is not let us take the case of this FBI directors and Russian. It's very clear. If you go back to Robert Mueller's investigation, Mueller's investigation, that clearly pointed out there is nothing substantive and there is no smoking gun. There is no clear and precise information that points to that Trump and Russia collaborated in the election interference allegation that was the basis for whole of this investigation. Okay, that was an independent investigation by a special prosecutor, and who happened to be Robert Mueller, and that was set up. And despite that, the FBI guys, probably under the Democratic. Remember, at that point of time, both the Senate and the House was Democrats until it flipped in 2018. This was going on, and which resulted um, in the FBI guys, moving in and out of the offices and not putting an end to the drama and allowing the government to focus. So entire 2017 to 2020 was dogged by this FBI, Department of Justice, to some extent. The DOJ guys were also part of this whole thing, not bringing this to a decisive close and allowing this to linger while President Trump conducted his business as usual.
Also, there was another department that Trump started because he really didn't think that CIA and FBI were doing their job. Sridharji, touch upon that, sir. We are just talking about what happened. And there was a report from that department. I think it's called DNI. And that one actually talked about the elections also. Sir, take it away, sir.
Yes, I think it's the Department of National Intelligence and Security, National Intelligence, which came under his jurisdiction. And the DNI objective was to collect independent, verifiable data in terms of breaches within the government, any compromises on national security that was happening. This was the period that they also discovered. If you recall, we covered again in DGI the number of the interference within China by the Chinese within United States, the breaches into Department of Defense, the computers being cyber hacked, potential threat to the national infrastructure at that point of time. And some of the attacks that happened within our energy infrastructure, I think Sriji has covered that as well as in his monologues. So during that particular period, a lot of this information came through the DNI and mitigated, and progressively, Trump administration began to act. They punished Chinese for every act through tariffs and other kinds of measures, and also blacklisted some of the agencies. During this same period, this was the one when the Huawei investigation.
The daughter of the CEO of Huawei.
Correct.
Treasurer,
the CFO, Huawei, and then they basically in collaboration with the Canadians, they stalled and they stopped and they eventually arrested, only for the Biden administration to release her. So and this was leading up. Going up and leading all the way to the COVID leaks and the COVID the COVID epidemic or COVID pandemic, and prompted Trump to name it as China COVID, China pandemic explicitly. And he made it a point that there was a leak, and we have enough data and enough evidence to point out that this came from Wuhan lab. This was rebutted at that point of time. His CDC general was Dr. Fauci. He and Dr. Fauci sparred with each other during that period of time. All these events unfolded, and the data came out and the information came out because he had this DNI under him. Sriji?
Thank you so much, sir. Because I wanted our viewers to understand that a lot of things have been happening. In the United States, there's a huge amount of churn that's going on. And Trump somehow was not liked both by the Republicans as well as Democrats. The Republicans felt that he was not one of them, that he got parachuted. The Democrats felt that he is a guy who used to be with us, now he has gone against us. Whatever be the reason, but the guy tried to do something. He did try and shake up the system. Let's admit it for what it is. Now, because I'm saying all this, because today news is coming that China is in the grip of a massive Omicron variant COVID. And what is coming out is that even before the Congress, the CCP Congress convened, Beijing was already in the grip of this outbreak. So why I say this is CCP is trying to, remember the white paper protest where people are holding up blank white sheets as a form of protest for keeping people confined in their houses and so on. So the CCP was trying to say that it's because of those protests that the COVID situation has gotten out of hand. That is not true. It is now coming to light that even as the CCP Congress was going on, Beijing itself was under a sustained attack of COVID, and people were just dying because there were no medications. The vaccines weren't working. Even today, the vaccines continue to not work. And some crazy things are happening, Sridharji. I just want to take 30 seconds to tell people what is happening. Store shelves in Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, United States, all disappearing. Ibuprofen, paracetamol, Tylenol. Paracetamol is a basic, formula, and all these things are being taken. And I'm wondering who would dare to go from like US to China to go and deliver these medicines. It's a crazy thing to do. Also, last week, December 15th, United States has closed its consulate. Germany has closed its consulate. Japan did it a few days before that. There is total lockdown. I think the flights from China will also be suspended to United States. I would not be surprised at all. So there is a concern that this could be something of an unknown type. Although Indian virologists have come out and said that India is already protected by the current vaccine for this variant. Again, I'm quoting some screenshots that I saw, and India doesn't have to worry about it. Of course, you have to take due concern. I mean, make sure that you may have to wear face mask for some time. This is what the latest is. Sridharji, if you have any update, please feel free to share, sir.
Yeah, I think I want to just make sure that everybody understands this word: draining the swamp. This is what Trump was trying to do. Only thing is, he was left with a lot of mud from the swamp, and he couldn't clean himself before he quit before he was taken out in 2020. So that's on what he was trying to accomplish. As far as the COVID is concerned, two important data points. Republicans will unveil what we had stated in DGI and what we had indicated, that there is enough data, but it has not been published, that the virus did leak from Wuhan labs, and United States CDC had invested for gain of
function.
Gain of function for invested for gain of function, which Fauci denied. And you're going to see emails, data, everything being released in public by the Republicans when they take charge. And what you're witnessing in China is, I lived in Manhattan and I live in Manhattan, and the story is that in 2020, what we witnessed through 2020 and early 2021 is amazing scenes, is what you are witnessing in China today, right? All the stuff, paracetamols, deaths, constant, what you call ambulances, and entire converting hospitals because there was not enough hospital beds. The something scenes that was witnessed in vast parts of Europe, led by Italy, is what you are witnessing in China today. Is not just a question of rapid spread, but it is also lack of facilities and lack of inadequate preparedness by the Chinese government. But it is China, so information is suppressed, and is very clear it is that Wuhan lab from where that there was a biowarfare weapon program, and this leak occurred by accident, not by intent. The Republicans will unveil that it leaked by accident, not by intent and not by purpose, as part of the biogerm program. What else China is involved in, God only knows. But anyway, this is the truth, and we only hope that this doesn't become another problem, because tourists and travelers are swarming Asia, and where is China in Asia? And similarly, I hope this doesn't get spread to India as well, because there is a lot of Asian traffic that comes into India. Let's hope that we can prevail, because this is the last thing that we want at this point of time, Sriji.
Thank you very much, sir. And now let's take a quick look at what is happening in India's borders in Tawang. What latest information we have is the skirmishes are continuing. Now, one thing that I want you to kind of give us an idea about this, Sridharji. See, one of the theories being put out is that China is massing equipment and troops along the entire 3,000 odd kilometers of the LAC stretch, as if it is preparing for war against India. Now, you can look at it in two ways. One is it really intends to invade India. The second is it is forcing India to spend a lot of money buying its own set of weapons, building roads, building infrastructure. None of this used to exist because there was a natural wall, the Himalayas, and so so which of these two you think is happening? That China is trying to bankrupt India by forcing it to, get ready for a war which it doesn't intend to wage, or it does intend to wage a war?
Well, I think first and foremost, I can give a macro view based on the geopolitical situation. India is extremely well prepared. India is in a much better state than where it was ever before. It is in a much better state than where it was when Galwan attack occurred in 2020. It is in a much better state in recent times relative to where China is at the moment. It is fully organized and orchestrated. I don't know about whether along the 3,000 kilometer border, whether they're going to have armies lined up. Certainly what the lesson that they have learned is that all the strategic positions on the Indian side has been occupied by the Indian forces, giving them a significant advantage. Across the Pangang into this Tawang region, they lack their ability to move and deploy troops and rapid deployment of troops and backup in the event of an offensive position that India takes, or a backup if they entertain any thoughts, because they don't have a strategic point. They have not been able to displace. India from the strategic position. So they have now developed the infrastructure and capabilities so that they can have, in the event India takes up and moves inward and takes up more territory between the buffer region, then they can create an offensive position. I don't think China is saber rattling. They haven't even been able to tackle Senkaku, leave alone Taiwan, before it comes to India. So all this rubbish that is coming out to the left media, which is trying to stir up, because India is a rising power, right? India is a rising power. India is defensively also a rising power with so much of collaboration between various nations. So, at a macro level, what I can say is that India is well positioned. I just don't think China has the capability to entertain its aspirations beyond anything that they have. Even if they can hold positions, it's a great blessing. One more piece of data, which probably people are not, the mainstream media is not publishing. When many of these soldiers who were being moved into this region were interviewed, they were not very combat prepared. They were not willing to be in the region to fight, not knowing what they were doing in these cold areas at such high altitudes. So even they're trying to change that. So even in a land where they speak their own language, which is in Taiwan, they haven't done anything in terms of, rather than saber rattling or even making a ground invasion. I don't believe something is going to happen. This is all a political rhetoric and left-wing saber rattling that is coming from international media and domestic consumption politics, Riji. This is my kind of macro view.
Thank you, sir. And one last item on China. It's taking us a little bit of time, but I want to touch everything. So the way out for China is to request help for vaccines from India, from the West, from Europe, everywhere, and start seriously inoculating its people. Because if they do that, only if they do that today, at least by March, April timeframe, they'll have a semblance of normalcy. Now, the West needs to extract a very high price because all this misadventure, all the lies, $45 trillion worth of damage, which is what Trump administration had predicted. What needs to happen is that this whole CCP concept has to go. Democracy has to come in, free speech, freedom of pursuit of ideas. This is what needs to happen. But this is a far-fetched dream. What CCP is looking for is to somehow again put one carpet, make a small apology here and there, give some concessions to one country or the other, and take the vaccine. Although there is a problem there, Sridharji, and I want you to weigh in on my, kind of a rambling thought, but quickly I'm trying to come up. See, for the longest time, inside China, CCP was saying that it is United States that unleashed the virus on us. So for them to now go back and tell United States, well, we need vaccines, people are not going to accept that. So how do you think Mr. Xi Jinping is going to solve this problem?
Well, just one other data point on this, Sriji. The vaccines did not work. Sinovac and Sinopharm did not work.
Yes.
So smudged under the carpet. Many people who ordered Sinopharm, you remember they were trying to combat and compete with India to be the vaccine lab. So they shipped to a lot of nations, including to smaller nations. Some nations may be embarrassed if I mention these nations. I'll not mention the names of the nations. They all went back because they found it was not combative. It was not able to attack the COVID. They all went back to Pfizer, and they went back to Moderna. They went back to the vaccine from UK. I forget the name of the vaccine. So Pfizer, Moderna, and the third vaccine from the UK. Do you remember the name of the vaccine?
AstraZeneca.
Yes,
AstraZeneca.
it is AstraZeneca, but I'm looking
at
the name of the vaccine.
Editor.
And the variant of that was used by India, and in its first version of the vaccine. And remember, the vaccine factories were also the cyber targets by the Chinese. So they are not willing to admit that their vaccines are not capable, and they have this communist agenda that they will not import anything because they could be foreign agents and a threat to their society is what mitigating them. And their people cannot travel. This is the other kind of implosion that is happening for themselves to protect. I'm also told, Sriji, you gather from your own intelligence. You can infer from your own intelligence that the number of deaths that is happening in China is not getting reported. Yes, Covaxin is the Indian version of the vaccine, and that I can see the audience is kind of putting up. So this is where we are with regard to the complete and total mismanagement of Xi Jinping on vaccines, his foreign policy, his foreign diplomacy, his real estate crisis, his financial crisis, his stock market interference, complete mismanagement of Hong Kong, usurpation of power and central control. When they will implode from inside, we don't know, but most of the policy seems to be not working anything to advance the journey of China. In fact, Xi Jinping has taken China back by probably 2 decades.
Yes, and the number was exactly the same thing in my mind also. Two data points. Remember, when the COVID hit, Hong Kong was still a little bit more having more freedom. So Hong Kongers got Pfizer. So as an island, Hong Kong is less affected by this than the mainland China. But people say that even in Hong Kong, there are 10,000 cases of COVID, and China is 200 times the size of Hong Kong. So you can immediately say how many people are infected. We said in an Elmer show that at least 3 million are infected. Now it is multiplying like crazy. So we have to see where that number is going to go and end. So this is what it is. I think that flights will also get stopped from China, going out of China, and this will, things have to improve before China can come back mainline. And India needs to be prepared for a lack of goods, because I don't think even if India wants to import, China may have any pipeline, because 8 people died in an Apple iPhone manufacturing plant. That city was called iPhone City. 8 people died in a room, which is why the Foxconn employees just ran out. They were scared to come back to work. It was a terrible situation. And so right now, many of the things that they could do are not able, they're not able to do those things. China is having a huge problem, and we have to wait and see how this plays out. Whether they'll accept that there is a problem and then ask for help from outside, or if there's also another possibility that CCP could have engineer a coup, replace Xi with somebody else, and that guy will say, usually this is the communist story. The guy before did all the wrong things. I am going to set everything right, and sort of push the reset button and say, okay, now you give me vaccines without dismantling the CCP structure. That's also possible. A lot of things are happening. So last news about India. Sridharji, you are predicting that the Indian rupee could slide a little bit more against the United States dollar. Sir, why do you feel so, sir?
Well, I think firstly, there are two reasons. One is the interest rate. Whenever there is an interest rate differential, I think the rates were lower in United States. The rates were higher. The rates now are actually, the interest rate differential is coming down. When the interest rate differential comes down, then you have a consequence on the kind of the currency situation, because there's a more demand for there's obviously a more demand for the currency. So you are seeing a slight uptick in the price as a result of the interest as United States ticks up the as a rate. You find that the rate differential coming down. Remember, at one point of time, United States was 2%. Now it is around close to 5%. Or 4.5%. So that has a consequence, and that will definitely impact the Indian rupee.
And that brings us to a close of today's show. There's one question that I'd like to show here. Somebody's asking me, we will not make a fortune out of misfortune and provided free vaccines to the rest of the world. Should that really be the move in a possible but not probable future pandemic? India is always Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is but one small family. This COVID you can think of as a way of nature asserting itself, that things have gone out of whack. And that could also be another way. And remember, many of you are putting comments that even though you had COVID and you came out of it, you continue to feel sick. The effects of this is pretty bad. And I think many people need to review their eating habits. Some of the things that they eat could be still be a problem to them. And I had one session with a very famous Ayurveda hospital and its founder, Dr. Ramkumar, and he said that the sensible thing to do is to go vegetarian. I'm not saying this because I'm a vegetarian, that Sridhar Chityalaji is a vegetarian. That is what Dr. Ramkumar said. You can go back and look at Vaidyagrama was the name of the place. It's a very reputed place. They have people working in many critical areas in all over India where Ayurveda is needed to. Some of the critical healthcare workers, they need to be sure that they will never get exposed, and Ayurveda has the solution for that. Not many of us, like, I think, what was the thing, sir? I remember one, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is a good prophylactic. You can drink it, and then that kind of takes care of your thing for a while. But his general impression was that, consider being a vegetarian. So that has got less incidence of the problems that you're going to face from a pandemic such as COVID. I hope I answered your question. Sridharji, if you would like to add something before we wind up, sir.
No, I think you did a great job. So my only further addendum to the narrative that you had shared is, when there is a pandemic, deal with the pandemic in a charitable manner, because as someone rightly said, that you don't profit from somebody's misfortune. But on a long-term basis, if you want to take supply of the vaccines as a deterrence, which is now happening in the United States, then it has to be for a commercial purpose. So one is to deal with the pandemic, then that is charitable. But as a long-term deterrence, if you want to procure, then it has to be for a commercial purpose, because the Indian government doesn't want to be, or any government doesn't want to be underwriting the problems of the medical needs of the rest of the world. So I think that would be my response. And the final point is India destroyed because they have a time expiry millions of vaccines because there was no necessity, and some of the people had raised whether there is vaccine 3, vaccine 4, vaccine 5. India was able to meet the challenge with 2 vaccines. The reasons are that I think there is, as Shriji pointed out, one is the food and the general kind of antibodies within the system. Most of us who live in the Western world, we have lost our immunity for many, many facets. So many of us have to take progressive vaccines. And by the way, if you are living in any of the Western nations, we take as a natural or as a normal course every year, flu season, we are subjected to a vaccine. That means more and more immunity we are lost, and we become addicted to the consumption or the taking of these vaccines. Hence, for us, any of these flu variants can trigger. So we need to keep on taking version 3, version 4, version 5, version 6. But if you're fairly well prepared, you can dispense with that. Best way I would kind of advise people, which I do, is to go and do serology tests and check your antibodies within your system. And if you have sufficient antibodies, tell your doctor you're not going to take another vaccine, because if you have antibodies, you take more vaccine, it's going to damage your body. There's no doubt about it. And I'm just speaking from my own personal experience.
Thank you so much. And last item, I forgot to say this thing. So my editor was watchful. He told me to touch upon this. Benjamin Netanyahu is back as the Prime Minister of Israel, and he's planning a visit in 2023 to India. But let's just talk about the return of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has got a lot of ultra conservatives in his cabinet. What kind of a cabinet, what kind of a government is this going to be compared to his predecessor, sir?
Well, I think that a Biden administration anticipated he's not going to tolerate anybody aspiring threats. That's number one. He will respond with disproportionate force so that nobody aspires and takes Israel for granted. But the most important agenda item that is likely to come up is whether he will resume settlements in the Palestine region. So vast number of his cabinet members are supportive of, they do not believe in two-state theory. They believe in settlements and retaking the land, which they believe legitimately belongs to Israel. So that is one of the items that we need to watch. And whether Netanyahu will go full steam or whether he will be able to rein in his right-wing colleagues remains to be seen. And Biden administration has responded. I don't need to mention the components and the composite nature of the Biden administration, but they have responded to say that if there is any threat to the Palestinian state and the two-state theory, and settlements happening in Palestine, they will hold Benjamin Netanyahu personally accountable.
Well, interesting times ahead, and the fact that he wants to visit India tells us that he is exploring a closer relationship with India. India has managed to walk that fine line. I mean, I have to admire. Both Sridharji and I were a little bit skeptical at the beginning when the Ukraine war started, if it would damage India, but somehow they managed to thread the needle through this diplomatic mess that is Russia-Ukraine conflict. And let's wait and see how things play out. Once again, Sridharji, this was one of the most productive, useful news, full of news content, where probably the viewer didn't expect so much to come, but I think we have covered a lot of stuff in a very relatively short amount of time. Thank you once again. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. The reason I keep saying this, 60% of the viewers are subscribers, 40% of you are still not subscribing. Please consider doing so. Thank you very much, Sridharji. We'll be back again in a couple of days.
Thank you. Namaskar. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and wonderful evening.